Merlot is grown all over Napa Valley, but there are radical differences between the cool southern fruit of Carneros and Oak Knoll and the more alcoholic, extracted, richer colored fruit from Calistoga and St. Helena in the north end of the valley. Carneros has a sort of herbaceous flavor from the slightly underripe grapes compared to the much more brawny and extracted characteristic that you get near Calistoga that have sort of blueberry notes from the very ripe grapes. That these regions are less than 30 miles apart is as good an illustration as any of why Napa Valley is such an extraordinary place. The further one gets from San Francisco Bay, the warmer the daytime temperature. So Calistoga is the hottest place in the valley. That means that the Merlot grown here ripens at least 2 weeks ahead of the southern fruit and consequently has very different characteristics. As the cool wind comes off of San Pablo Bay, it is drawn north up the valley, and the first thing that really stops it are the 200-foot-high hills that sit right behind the town of Yountville. And those kind of baffle the wind, and they make the two districts to the north after Yountville quite a bit warmer than the districts in the south, Carneros right on the bay and Oak Knoll next. Then as we continue further north up the valley, you can see how the valley really constricts, and where down near Carneros it might have been 4 or 5 miles wide, it's really only about a half a mile wide north of St. Helena. And that helps to really stop the cool air there. And then it broadens out quite a bit. We see that wide part of the valley that gets a lot of sunshine and warms up quite a bit, but doesn't get the cooling effect of the breeze from the south. One of the interesting things about the 2004 movie Sideways was that it just really slammed sales of Merlot because the Paul Giamatti character, Miles, so thoroughly badmouthed Merlot as a wine. But the inside joke that nobody really understood was that at the end of the movie, Miles drinks his favorite wine by himself, and that wine was Chateau Cheval Blanc, which in most vintages is about 50% Merlot. So you have no reason to be snobbish about Merlot. Bordeaux has always been the inspiration and benchmark for Napa's Cabernet and Merlot producers, and it's instructive to see what they do with it over there. The gravelly soils of the Médoc are ideal for Cabernet Sauvignon, which would never ripen on the cooler clay soils of the right bank, which is where the earlier ripening Merlot dominates. The Bordeaux blend was developed to ensure that the wine could be produced in even the worst years by adjusting the percentages of these varietals in the blend. The weather is generally more reliable in Napa, but the cool weather in the south is a significant factor in determining flavor. In the mornings, the bay fog leaves Carneros overcast, so the vines only have a few hours of ripening before the wind picks up at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Gives you an interesting effect of prolonging the time that the grapes are going to stay on the vine. They do retain good acid, they ripen more slowly, but they don't produce some of the flavoring components that you might get in an area that had cool weather without the wind. So I'm having a mushroom Swiss burger, and we'll see what we think about how this actually works. Oh, wonderful. We're going to compare Merlots from 4 different districts as you run from south up through the middle of Napa Valley to the north. I'm joined by Katie Hunter. This is actually Katie's office. Winemakers who are concerned with terroir tend to describe Carneros as generally having a little bit of a dill note to it.
I would say it definitely has, more of that herbal characteristic.
Yeah, it certainly isn't that big, rich, chocolatey thing that a lot of people think of when they think of Merlot. Now, the one from Oakville shows the wood a little bit more. To me, it's not as distinct from the grape.
Agreed. And there's almost some chocolate notes, and I think the sweeter aromatics along with some of the more sort of rich fruit notes. I would say it's not necessarily a blueberry characteristic, though.
It does have a tremendous amount of finish.
Then going back to the Merlot from Carneros, it does seem much sort of lighter.
Less alcoholic. It's got good length, good complexity. Do you have a favorite between the two?
My personal preference is for the lighter and lower alcohol.
There does seem to be a significant color difference that Carneros seems to have held the purple colors perhaps a little bit longer. Well, let's try the younger wines. We have some that are 2 years old, just released. Here, I think we would expect to find a darker color, gutsier, more pronounced, maybe more of the chocolatey berry characteristics in the Calistoga, whereas the Oak Knoll, being so far to the south, I think you don't get the strong herbaceous character, but you do get something that's a little bit lighter bodied and not quite as assertive.
Very bright fruit.
I think that a lot of Americans want that from Merlot. Is the fruitiness is part of the attraction. I think that was what really brought about the Merlot phenomena, was that people discovered that, gee, Cabernet was painful to drink. I think that this is more of a sort of everyday wine, not quite as serious, one that you can have more frequently.
But it's very pleasant, it's smooth, the tannins aren't overwhelming, despite the wine being fairly young.
Gee, look at that
The aromatics, it's dark purple.
A mouthful. Really much too young to be drinking it today, I think. I think that's going to do a lot of developing. It'd be hard to think of something to serve it with right now.
Very, very heavy piece of meat or roast.
Yeah, and I think that what we have seen in the tasting this morning is that the terroir will express itself if the winemaker is willing to let that happen. But as you'll see if you go to the blog where we show the tasting that we did a month ago, it's not always the case that you can sometimes find wines that are not typical of the terroir where the grapes were grown. They don't have what the French would call typicité.